We had webinar 1 in this series last month, and we really talked about overcoming barriers to entry. So as we have aspiring teacher apprentices who we are inviting into our programs at our EPPs, there are some barriers to entry that they often experience related to GPA. Maybe that's not in the place that we want it to be, or an ACT or an SAT score, or maybe some transfer credit from a whole variety of places that we're learning how to manage. So if you're curious or interested about any of those topics, I would encourage you to watch the recording from webinar 1. You can find that on our website. We shared a little bit mini walkthrough of a report from Kale that was helpful, that just helped to paint that picture of prior learning assessment. And we're going to dive even more deeply into that conversation today with some of our guests. And we learned last time that there are both really great people reasons to be mindful of prior learning assessment. It's a great thing to do for our students to honor their knowledge and skills. There are also some really strong business reasons to engage in prior learning assessment and competency-based education. And so our guests will talk about that a little bit today. So to dive into today's agenda, we are going to learn from Dr. Alison Winzeler here from North Carolina and Dr. Brett Geier from Western Michigan University. But to kick things off, it's always great to hear from an actual learner. So Brian, we are so excited that you took a few minutes to join us today to tell us a little bit about your experience on this call. Brian, you have a whole bunch of faculty and school district leaders, and so we're excited to hear from you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate you guys let me speak. So thank you.
Absolutely, Brian. Well, it's good to see you again. I'm Bianca Pratt with the Grow Your Own Center. And I've got a few questions for you to introduce Brian. Brian Stanfill is currently in an job embedded placement after starting his licensure pathway as a teacher apprentice. He was recently nominated for a Claxton Medallion Award, which honors outstanding future educators, and we're thrilled that he chose to share his time with us today. So to get started, Brian, can you share with us your journey that led you to become a working learner nominated for the Claxton Medallion Award? And how do you feel the alternative license pathway has met your needs along your journey?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I again appreciate the opportunity to talk, and I really can't say enough about the job embedded program. I retired as an engineer about 2 years ago, and I've always loved teaching. I've always taught my Sunday school class. I've coached youth basketball for the last 20 years plus, and I had a gentleman that worked for me in the engineering field, and he was a retired principal, and he would always tell me, you should go be a teacher. And I always loved it. And he and I sit down and we talked a bit about, what the pathway would be, and had an opportunity come forward for me to retire as an engineer. And I still have young kids in school, and my wife and I sat down and talked, and I always had the heart for it. So I went and met with the leadership in our county and said, hey, what's the pathway that I should choose to, because my undergraduate wasn't in education. What's the pathway that I should choose in order to become a licensed teacher in Tennessee? And they were very familiar with the Job Embedded and Grow Your Own program, and directed me right to Tennessee and a couple others. But being a Tennessee grad myself, it was a no-brainer for me to go right into Tennessee, and began on the pathway there to becoming a special education teacher. And I chose that because my oldest son, he's 16, and he's dyslexic. And what I journeyed through with him from when the time we discovered in his 4th grade year to the struggles that he dealt with socially and and academically as well, really gave me the heart that I felt like I needed to be in the special education side, and I wanted to help on the interventionist side. And I didn't want kids to go through what he went through, and I was very fortunate to get a job here at the school where my children go. But it's an incredible program here. I've got to work with some incredible teachers, and to pat them on the back. My son is now in 9th grade as an honors student, and he currently doesn't even have an IEP. And I assure you, it's not because of his incredible work ethic. It was good folks and good educators pointing him in the right direction, and I wanted to be a part of that. And I've been fortunate here at Gatlinburg Pittman Junior High and high school to be a part of that. So that's the short, long and the short of how I got here.
That's great. Reflecting on your experience, what specific challenges or barriers to entry did you encounter when pursuing enrollment or licensure? And how did you navigate through those challenges?
I can tell you, Dr. Kate Smith at the University of Tennessee was phenomenal, and maybe I was just fortunate to get her as my advisor. I might be a little bit pushy when it comes to meeting deadlines and making things happen, and I think she picked up on that quickly. And she was always very responsive. So really, I didn't run into any gaps other than me waiting on an email from here or there, and that's just my personal gaps that I have. Wanting things to happen quickly. But the University of Tennessee has been. I couldn't say anything better about how the job embedded program has worked for my situation and my needs. Yeah, I'm a very active parent. I have 3 children. They all play multiple sports or in multiple secondary activities. I help with beta. I coach baseball. I coach basketball. There's not a lot of there isn't any downtime around my home, and this program is really fit my need well.
Thank you. As you reflect on this program and pathway, what support systems or resources have you found to be most valuable?
So I was very interested in how this was going to unfold. As um, you hear a lot about online education, but how's it all going to work? Well, and I don't know how every other university does, but UT has a Canvas system, and it has really been incredible. There are some educators who utilize it to great extent, and then there's some who utilize it to a lesser extent, but that's just because of the class need. And it is very easy to use. I mean, everything can flow through there. It's just been phenomenal.
Great. And last, in what ways has the alternative licensure program prepared you for the demands and the responsibilities of being a teacher? And can you highlight any specific aspects of the program that have been particularly beneficial in supporting your success?
It is from an educational side. It was so incredible to be able to be working with students and learning about their disabilities at the same time. It's been invaluable for me to have that life experience, and I've been very fortunate with some good teachers here as well. But I tell you, some of the best teachers that I've had here have been the students. And when you're learning about let's just say dyslexia in the classroom, and then you're working with students directly with dyslexia. It's not something I'm learning now. I'm gonna apply 4 years from now. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, and it has been. I can't say enough good things about it. The 1-to-1 ratio, the connecting while you're in the middle of it, has been incredible. It's been incredible.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing your story with us and great work. And best of luck in the future. Thanks for sharing with us today. And Aaron, I'll
Thank
hand
you,
it back
guys.
over to you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, very good. So lots to highlight there from Brian's experience. I love the opportunity, the theory to practice. That's something we hear a lot, right? I'm learning this in the classroom, but then I'm putting it into practice right away in my classroom with my students. I think that's a real strength of this model. So as I mentioned before, workshop 1, we were talking about barriers to entry, GPA, test scores. One of the things we learned was that we can award credit for prior learning, and we have some guests with us today who are going to talk about specific examples of that. So I'm excited to introduce next Dr. Brett Geier from Western Michigan University. Brett's a published author. He is professor of the Department of Educational Leadership, Research, and Technology of the College of Education and Human Development at Western Michigan University. And they have been innovating in this space for a few years now. So looking forward to hearing from you. Brett, any words of introduction you want to share with our group before we dive in?
Got to find the unmute button. No, thank you very much for letting me come today. It's really cool to be talking to folks in Tennessee, and I look forward to sharing what we're doing and answer any questions that I can.
Awesome. Well, if you could just start by providing an overview, just a short history of prior learning assessment and your degree programs for teacher education at Western Michigan.
Sure. This started a couple of years ago from a couple of different tracks, but in Michigan, what we have, and this is really looking at administrative programs. I suppose it could be adapted for teaching prep programs, but specifically I'm in the administration. So what we saw a couple of years ago was that in Michigan, we have two tracks for administrators, a central office track and a K-12 administrator, the latter being for principals, the first one being more for central office folks. And our associations in Michigan have been very involved in providing these certificate programs in kind of a non-traditional track. That's a whole nother discussion, but they're able to do it at a far reduced cost and a period of time that is probably about a half of what we do. So for students, cost and efficiency is very attractive. And so over the last 10 years or so, in combination with some legal changes, we have lost a lot of students in a traditional path. Combine that with the fact that we've had a number of students that have come to us and can you hear me now? Somebody said that they couldn't hear me. Can you? Okay. We've had a number of students who have come to us that have said, you know, I've been a curriculum coordinator for 10 years. Can I get credit for the curriculum course? And we've had to say, no, we have no mechanism by which to transfer work experience into credits. So we would have to stick with the university program policies, which say, you know, we could only transfer in 6 credit hours. And that depended on what the person had and our program and so forth. So kind of a perfect storm hit. And we said there's an opportunity here to use prior learning assessment. And so we developed a program by which we are now able to, in essence, transfer in 3 different mechanisms over into Western Michigan University credit. And those are work experience. So if somebody has been a principal for 10 years, we're able to look at some things and decide if they are able to transfer their work experience into college credit. Second are professional development opportunities, conference opportunities. As I said, we have some very strong associations in the state, and they provide a number of different trainings. It's possible that those trainings can be transferred over into Western Michigan University credit. And then 3, we've expanded the possibility of transfer credit. So where we have only been able to transfer in 6 credit hours in the past, we are now able to take university credit from the state or out of state and actually turn that into Western Michigan University credit to, in a sense, I don't want to say circumvent, because we're not trying to circumvent policy, but in order to get students more credit that they deserve through those 3 different mechanisms, if you will.
That's great. Sounds like you're really focused on serving students well. So can you walk us through a little bit of the logistics? Like, how did you implement this shift?
I won't say that there was necessarily a shift, but what we did, and one of the things I forgot to mention, and I apologize for that, is within those certification programs that we have, we appropriate up to half of those certification programs. So for instance, our masters in ed leadership combined with the K-12 administrative certification is 30 credit hours. That's pretty typical of a master's degree. 15 of those hours could be PLA'd. The same thing in the central office, except our law in Michigan is that in order to get a central office certificate, you have to have 21 hours past the MA. And so we allow in that process 4 courses, 4 out of 7, to potentially be PLA'd. With the associations, they can grant certification, but they can't grant degrees. So we took that market, started working with the associations and said, okay, you've got your certification, but if you can come here, we can grant, in many cases, it's really exploded our EDS and PhD. We have a number of students coming back for those 2 programs. So we grant half of the credits for the central office certification or the building certification. And the one that has probably been the most productive is what we call our Route 1. So these folks go through their certification training. They get their certificate from the association, and then they come to us and finish up with a degree. And we're able to take the work that they've done through their certificate and apply it to our degree program. The programs that we institute for PLA are all based on the NELP standards, for the national NELP standards, which are also approved and in place at the state level. So all of the PLA that we grant has to be based on the NELP standards. With our third option, which is the work experience, this requires a little bit more effort on the part of the faculty. And that's okay, because we like to maintain control of this. Probably we have not had a lot of negative feedback on it, but if there was a rumbling regarding it, there were people probably saying, well, are you giving away credits? And the answer is no, we're not. Because if somebody says, hey, I've been a principal for 10 years and I want credit for the principalship course, they are required to develop a pretty rigorous portfolio, and they have to articulate through a narrative as well as providing evidence that they have met the standards, the NELP standards that we have assigned to that particular course. That portfolio is then evaluated by 2 faculty members, and we have actually had discussions about including practitioners in the evaluation. Some of our superintendents have said, you know, we'd like to be involved in that evaluation. So that's something that we're looking at as well. But for right now, 2 faculty members evaluate these portfolios to determine if their work experience meets the standards and the rigor that we feel is appropriate for qualifying them for PLA credit. So the faculty never lose control of the process. If they are bringing in college credit, well, we trust thoroughly that the university or college that has provided that course and credit is meeting certain standards and approved by state associations and so forth. With the first one, with conference and professional development, again, it's reviewed by faculty to make sure that if you are taking a superintendency training course, that it actually meets the standards that we have developed for our superintendency course. And then the third one with work experience, that is a rigorous portfolio, and it is evaluated thoroughly by faculty. So faculty always maintain, I'd say, strict control over awarding credit. It is not something that the student has a right to or is entitled to, but it is approved by the faculty. However, I can say most of our students are pretty traditional folks that are in the schools, have gone through association superintendent programs and so forth. 90 to 95% of them are quality, and it has really helped us increase enrollment, especially in our EDS and PhD program.
Can you give some sense for those numbers just quickly for growth?
Yeah, when we first combined this with work with our association, so those folks that were getting a certificate and then coming to us for finishing a degree, we started that in the spring of 2023, and that particular cycle, we admitted over 40 EDS and PhD students. I want to say it was about 10 and 30, 10 PhD, 30 EDS. We have continued that cycle, and I believe this last one was about 15, 20. So it really has expanded to the point we have a whole nother issue now, and that's workload and on faculty and so forth. But with our central office courses, we've increased to, instead of offering those once every other year, we are now offering them once every year. So we've doubled that.
Mm-hmm. Great. We are going to have some time in breakouts towards the end of the webinar for questions for Brett and Alison. So I'll just wrap up one more question with Brett, and then we'll hear from Alison as well. And you all will have a chance to connect with them for about 5 minutes in just a few minutes. But Brett, if you could wrap up just by sharing some of the lessons that you learned along the way as you were opening up this new pathway into your degree programs.
Yeah, I can honestly say there wasn't anything really negative. The biggest thing was learning systems. So, you know, the university, there's, for instance, with the portfolio, there's a charge for that for the student of about $400, and then $100 for any additional portfolio review. Well, the university works that system, so we had to learn some system kinds of things, not insurmountable. It's been very well received and supported by our administration. They're really, the only negative is just working through the process to develop it, going through our grad studies council, our curriculum review process. Quite honestly, we didn't think we were going to get approval for half of our certificate programs. We did. We were excited about that. And when I say that came from the university, we didn't think we would get that approval. So we were excited about that. Really, there haven't been many negative things to speak of. You know, the only hardship is maybe when a candidate applies for it, and you know, you have to come back and say whatever you've done, either portfolio or professional development, doesn't quite meet the standards, but it's usually easy to say why. So I'd say overall it's been really positive.
Great. That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing your experience. Like I said, you all will have a chance to ask some questions of Brett and Alison here in just a few minutes, but we want to hear from Dr. Alison Winzeler from North Carolina next to hear another perspective on new and different pathways into the education profession. So Bianca and Alison.
All right. Well, thank you, Erin. And just to introduce Alison, Dr. Alison Winzeler is the Alternative Licensure Director for North Carolina State's College of Education and the Director of Pathway to Practice North Carolina, an all-online competency-based teacher licensure program that serves over 75 counties in North Carolina. So we're excited to have you with us today, Alison, to share your expertise around this area. To start, could you walk us through the journey of how your institution first implemented competency-based education? You know, what were the initial steps, challenges faced, or strategies employed to overcome any of those challenges?
Sure, and thank you for having me today. It's always exciting to talk about the program and our pathway and what we offer. There's some things updating on my screen all of a sudden, and I'm going to cross my fingers that it doesn't kick me out. So if I do, I'll come right back, I promise. Okay, so the journey started when we answered an RFP from the UNC System office for CBE programs. And not just that, collaborative CBE programs. So one or more institutions collaborating to create a program that was competency-based. And this was to encourage that kind of initiative and that kind of new CBE thinking this was back in 2016, 2017. So we collaborated with UNC Chapel Hill. When I say we, it's the College of Education at NC State and the School of Education at UNC Chapel Hill to answer this RFP for an all-online competency-based residency program for licensure program for residency teachers. Back then it was called lateral entry. So we made the shift to the residency program in 2019. So a couple of years after we launched the program, but I'm just going to use the word residency to refer to all of it in terms of what we heard from the first speaker regarding entry into the classroom right away. And then you're doing your licensure coursework while you're teaching. So some of those initial steps were forming that collaborative team from both institutions, getting faculty buy-in because we needed the faculty experts to help write the curriculum, content area teams we established that would work together on those modules, finding an LMS that would support the CBE needs. So we actually, Pathway to Practice is a separate EPP under NCDPI's categories. So it's not NC State and it's not UNC, it's both. And we have our own accreditation, we have our own budget, we have everything we do is kind of our own, but we have people from both universities that work on it. And I mentioned that getting that faculty buy-in from both universities was essential. I think we always had that was one of our, I would say our strong areas was the people, of course, that you find to work with that kind of gravitate toward this work. So initially we would have these large meetings where the whole faculty was invited from both schools. And soon they started to, the ones that didn't really want to engage, they had other things that they wanted to do. But then there were the ones that really wanted to continue this work. And that was very motivating and exciting. And we just kind of kept moving forward with each step of that initial process. We did get the grant that helped purchase the LMS at first. It also helped buy faculty time to write the modules and then to put the modules into the LMS. So I would say some other ways we overcame challenges were just being flexible and adaptive, managing our own expectations, willing to work with like a continuous improvement mindset, learning as we go, flying the plane while you're building it, kind of failing fast. Those types of mindsets, I think, really helped that innovative project that we established when we first kind of went on this journey. I love the word journey because it definitely has been one, and it's still one, I would say.
That's great. Can you share about how implementing competency-based education has contributed to the increased enrollment at your institution?
Yes. So especially for teacher residency, the way that it's set up in North Carolina, it boosted enrollment because we had a much more flexibility with start dates. So we created the curriculum to be self-paced, meaning they could start almost at any time and work at their own schedule, hitting minimum benchmarks and expectations. I think it's one module every 3 months. But that delivery and structure fit the needs of residency teachers, which we've seen in almost every state, how the teacher shortage has grown, the other pathways are opening. So residency teachers needed to affiliate with an EPP, and finding Pathway to Practice helped them fit into that need for a flexible schedule, starting on a monthly basis. So we have 10 out of the 12 months, we have a start cohort, skipping July and January. And that's because those teachers are hired throughout the year. I mean, you might be hired in October or March for your first teaching job, and you have to get affiliated almost right away, and they can get that support right when they begin. So our enrollment numbers, so 2020, we went from 75 students in 2019 to 153 in 2020, and these are new students. And then 167 in 2021, 156 in 2022, and then 170 in 2023. And they don't just take 1 year. They take about 1.5 to 2.5 years to finish, and sometimes less. So those added numbers are adding to a roster that already has active students on it.
It sounds, yeah, no, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, it was to that working at your own pace and flexible start dates, I think fit that need. We also, and I think we're going to answer another question about this, kind of the customer service mindset. And I know that that's a tricky philosophy to work into education, because the customer is always right, that mindset, but it has helped us get people information quickly. And I think that's also contributed to the success of the program.
Absolutely. It sounds like the model's really putting the students' needs first and finding how to meet those needs within your institution's policies and practices. So that's fabulous. What specific benefits have you observed CBE bringing to your learners?
So many of them discuss the in-time support and help while they are actively teaching for the first time. We start off with, so when they begin the program, modules 1 through 3 are a lot about the learner and learner environments, supportive environments for students, much about the not classroom management, but how to develop relationships with students in order to set them up for success and you up for success. So that is a benefit. So the curriculum itself, that alignment at the beginning of the program, and I would also say just the real world needs of teachers, learning how to lesson plan when they need to be writing lesson plans so they can use their students and their day-to-day schedule to submit to the curriculum, get feedback on it, but they're also learning it while they're doing it. I think increased confidence. They're learning these things, they're able to implement them immediately. They're able to get feedback from their facilitator. And I think that has also helped them develop that sense of professionalism in the classroom. But maybe before the program, they were seen as an emergency licensed teacher. Now they are, a teaching professional who is growing their skills.
That's great. And then lastly, could you share with us how your institution assesses the effectiveness of the CBE curriculum, both in terms of student outcomes and your institutional goals?
Oh, yes, lots of assessments. So we have lots of surveys and ways that we capture data from students and stakeholders, district needs. And then we kind of feed into that continuous improvement cycle where we revisit the data and change based on feedback. Right now, I'm in the throes of submitting Pathway to Practice up for CAPE accreditation. So, I'm actually that's all I've been thinking about for 3 days is assessment. But we also, of course, have the dashboards, the state dashboards, and we're held accountable to an accountability model for those as well, just like any other EPP who have traditional programs. So the way that our teachers are rated through our evaluation system and their growth to how their employer satisfaction, all of those things at TPA Praxis comes back to us. And we try to use that data to inform our next steps.
That's fabulous. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us about your pathway and about the great opportunities that you all are providing your working learners.
Thank you. Those are great questions. I appreciate it.
All right, we will open it up for questions from the group. Does anybody have a question for Alison or Brett? Feel free to type in the chat or come off mute. We were going to use some breakout rooms, but since there's only 18 of us, we can probably all stay here together. While you all are thinking, I have a quick question for Allison. Allison, you talked about Pathway to Practice being a separate EPP. How did that decision come about? Was that for Pathway to Practice to be separate as opposed to a part of an existing EPP?
A lot of it had to do with it being supported by both schools of education, and there was a very logistical nightmare that came out of trying to associate with both, so we decided it was best to kind of be separate and not have our numbers mix with either. It's also much how we do it's like how we do our budget as well. It also gives more opportunity to look deeper into our program itself, apart from many of the other programs that make up those two schools. There were a lot of it was the funding model and the way that our funds are collected. It was just, when we brought in registration and records and we brought in the different LMSs in financial aid, the advice that we got was that combining two universities, even though your intentions are good, was just going to be very complicated. But to establish yourself as something separate, it can be done. And I think the decision was made because it was easiest at the time, but now it's become, I think, again, a great opportunity for growth.
Other questions from the group?
This could be for either Allison or Brett. I heard a lot of language around continuous improvement. And we know as we launch something, the next iteration, the next cohort, there are adjustments that we make. Are any of those changes that you made, would any of those come to mind as you are thinking about folks that are interested in starting this work as lessons learned that you could share?
I guess from my standpoint, at the university level, as many of you are aware, they sometimes move at a glacial pace, and we have a number of practitioners in our department that have come from K-12, and we're used to, we want to make a change, it gets done far more efficiently than maybe at the university level. So I think planning out and making sure that we knew all of the paths that we had to take through the graduate college, through the faculty senate and curriculum process was important to move it along. I want to say it was probably a 1.5 to 2 year implementation, just because of the schedule of the university. Not that we couldn't do it faster, but it was the university. So I think planning it out, making sure you know exactly what has to happen for approval will prevent a little bit of heartache down the road.
That's a great point. One of the reasons we're doing this webinar series is because we know that we will have our registered teacher apprenticeship program of study, competency-based education curriculum, online curriculum ready to share with EPPs across the state of Tennessee for fall of 2025. And so we're encouraging our EPPs to be planning ahead. It's going to take a 1.5 years, maybe longer, to build some of those programs that could make use of that curriculum. So to be thinking about kind of backward mapping that timeline and thinking about how we might start making plans now. Any other questions before we wrap up? Any fees associated with PLA?
Yeah. That's a good question. For Route 1 and 2, which is professional development, conference, review, and credit from a university, there is not a fee associated with that. There is a fee associated with Route 3, which is a portfolio review.
Great. All right. Well, we have some resources that we will share out via email afterwards. Bianca's going to talk about those quickly, I think.
Sure. Yeah, we've got some great resources for you all to take a look at. PLA opportunities and a PLA portfolio development course, so you can kind of see how WMU has set this up. And another piece of this is really communicating clearly to students what opportunities are available and making those opportunities really accessible. They've done a great job of putting it really clearly on their website. So that's a great example for you to take a look at. And then a PLA example used for professional experience. And then lastly, just to talk about next webinar, we will have some more great resources, and we'll be hearing from Kale about how they are seeing PLA really provided, those opportunities provided nationally. And so the conversation will definitely be continued next month as well.
Yes. Very good. Any other questions or thoughts before we wrap up today? Thanks again to our guests. Thank you so much for sharing about your programs. It's always helpful to hear real world examples. So we appreciate
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.